Honda's been making cars for quite some time now, but one of my tried and true favorites was always the Prelude. Everyday reliability like an Accord, but certainly more interesting to look at and more interesting to drive. But it's been about 25 years since we last saw one, which means there's an entire generation of folks who never had the showroom experience of a brand new Prelude. But that time is now gone, though what we get seems to be unrecognizable to some. I think that everything that made a Prelude unique and interesting is probably still present, but the question remains, what is the current Honda Prelude? My bigger question, is it misguided or just a little bit misunderstood? Last time we saw the Prelude, it was related to the Accord. Now, more like the Civic, specifically the Civic Hybrid, which is why you're going to find some of the blue accents throughout the vehicle. But up front, it doesn't look like a Civic, hatchback, sedan, or an outgoing coupe. It really does seem to be its own model, though I have to admit, there are a lot of levels here. I think overall I'm on board, and I have seen a few comparisons made to this headlight assembly looking a little bit like something like the Toyota Prius, which historically has not been a positive association, at least visually speaking. But if I'm not already on record, put me down right now as saying the new Prius is really good looking, so that's probably going to be a plus if the Prelude is being compared accordingly. From the side, this looks a fair bit sportier than the previous Civic Coupe, but I won't call this a sports car. I don't think there's any argument that it is. I will, however, call it a driver's car because even though this shape is very sleek and I think a little bit sexy, they've made sure there's room for the driver. That's who this is for. There is technically room for passengers in the back, but that sloping roofline isn't one that really lends itself to a lot of comfort. But don't worry, before the video is over, I will be back there and I'll show you just how much or how little space there really is. But one of the things that makes this better for an everyday driver, which I think is the category this should fall into, is that it is front wheel drive, it is front engine, and ends up being shorter on the front end than you get in a more traditional front engine rear wheel drive sports car. And while this is based on the Honda Civic, this is about an inch or so, maybe half inch shorter than the shortest version of the Civic, currently the hatchback. And that just means that it ends up being a little bit more nimble. There's no different here that using a different name and maybe even bringing back a nameplate seems worthwhile. But the reason they use Prelude is not because of how it looks, it's because of how it drives. And a lot has to do with what's happening here along the wheel well. The area that greatly differentiates this from every other Civic Hybrid out there is found in here, the wheels, tires, and suspension. Suspension not pulled from a Civic Hybrid or a Civic Si, straight from the Civic Type R, although tuned a little bit differently. Instead of modes like Sport and Race, we have GT and Sport. So let's say it's dialed back a little bit, meant to be a little bit more everyday friendly, but trust me, so far very nice out on the road. And when it comes to the contact with the road, that happens with the 235 width tire. This is a Continental Extreme Contact, not what I would call a low roll and resistance tire. And while you will take a hit on fuel economy, you are going to get a big boost when it comes to your overall grip. And it's not like they've left anything out in particular. When it comes to stopping, we have upgraded brakes. These are going to be Brembo brakes, again, pulled from that Civic Type R, although in this case, blue, which I think is a little bit less racy and does a better job of fitting the vehicle. But trust me, it does plenty good when it comes to actually stopping the car. Around back is the raciest look you'll get in the Prelude, and from here or about 3/4 is where I get a lot of Porsche. But if there's another vehicle that you're getting in this design, let me know down in the comments because it's an interesting amalgamation of everything. But I love the taillight that runs all the way across the back. It does sit up really high, great for visibility and okay for overall style. At the bottom here, a lot of shiny black, which does look good, at least for the moment, but no exposed exhaust tips, which is a little bit interesting. Say Sport E, but not sports cars. You would obviously have big, loud exhaust pipes, although of course there is one, it's just over here on the passenger side. But when it comes to everyday usability, you have to have space. And this is not a traditional coupe, this is a liftback. Liftback is great for getting your stuff in and out. It's got about 15.1 cubic feet with the rear seats up, although what those rear seats are doing is still a slightly different conversation. I'll show you here what they look like when they're folded all the way down. That might be the way you use it more often than not, or at least when you need to load some stuff up. But loading in my 22-inch roller bag, you can see here it takes up a lot of the opening space here, but I can actually put it almost all the way against the wall here and have it fit comfortably. Although the space in here isn't completely flat. It does have a bit of a hump in it. Underneath, there's a little bit of storage if you lift this up here, but not really any I would call super usable. Enough for emergency flares, blankets, and emergency snacks, but no spare tire comes with this, and there's not a lot of, well, there's no room to put one regardless, but there's not a whole lot of space beyond that. So that's your sacrifice, is in the sporty design, but I still think it gives you enough space to make it usable. Let me blow the lid right off the most controversial aspect of this entire vehicle. Under the hood is a 2-liter, 4-cylinder hybrid engine. It's front-wheel drive only, and it makes only 200 horsepower, but about 232 pound-feet of torque. I'd call this a sporty everyday driver. But sports cars have power to the rear, and they have more than 200, but what they don't have is over 40 miles per gallon. This is 46 city, 41 highway, and 44 overall combined. That's less than the Civic Hybrid, but it's way more fun and interesting to drive than a Civic Hybrid and a Civic Si. A Type R, maybe not so much, but you sacrifice a lot of everyday usability or maybe comfort in that vehicle that you just don't have to here. And you're certainly not going to get anywhere close when it comes to fuel economy. But you won't be rowing your own gears either, because Honda's 2-motor hybrid system doesn't even have a transmission, which is why it's interesting that this has paddle shifters and Honda's new S Plus shift mode. That means that the car mimics shifting gears, and it lets you physically shift gears or physically pretend to, because it just revs the engine and then kicks down or up accordingly. It doesn't really even give you any more power, because the power is coming through the electric motors, and while obviously that engine is powering the electric motors indirectly, you're not quite connected in the same way. But does it mean it's a good driving experience? That one we'll have to wait till we get on the road. When it comes to the front seat comfort, and in a vehicle like this, that is just about everything, I have to give this probably a preliminary 8.5, 9 out of 10, but there is a caveat. And that's because it fits me really well, but the adjustability is limited. And not just limited in the range of it, but also limited where I have to do everything manually. You can raise and lower the seat, you can slide it forward or backwards and tilt, but there's no lumbar support, and even though it has pretty bolstered seats themselves, you can't actually adjust the bolster. If your body type is the one that works, awesome. If not, you might run into a little bit of a problem. You also have to adjust the steering wheel manually, tilt and telescope, but I was able to find a very comfortable position for myself. The only issue is things do get a little bit tight. I'm 6 feet tall, I have a fairly tall torso, and I sit upright, and I truly have about maybe half an inch to an inch. It doesn't actually impede my visibility, which is really nice, but my head doesn't have a lot of extra clearance. The passenger seat is also a little bit different. It's less bolstered than we have up front, which is a bit unusual, but probably better for comfort over there on the passenger side. Although in the back roads that we've been driving today, my passenger has probably wished they had maybe just a little bit more bolstering. But that's for the front seat, where most people will be. Let's go see what it looks like in the back. Let's talk about getting into the back seat, because it's not the simplest process. There is a seat belt, but that's connected to the seat via this button loop situation. You have to disconnect that so the seat belt can come back. Then we can slide the seat forward, but to actually slide it forward, we have to go to the rails, activate that, push it forward, all done manually. Now we have an opening, which isn't actually terribly small. However, when you get back here in this 4-seat arrangement, with this seat set for where I would probably sit as the passenger, I can dig my feet under the seat. That actually does fit. My legs can be into the back of this seat, not quite comfortable, and my head really has nowhere to go. I do sit tall, but let's not pretend that many adults, or hardly any adults, would really fit back here. If I needed to, I could lean sideways, but boy, would I hope we don't get in an accident. And I don't even have an armrest. That's because this rear seat is not really for passengers. It exists, it's there, and you can use it if you have to, but think of this as the emergency second row, where some SUVs have an emergency third row. That said, surprisingly, I'm not sure how you would get them in here, but there are latch anchors here in the back, so if you wanted to affix some child seats, you could do one on each side. Just know that is going to be really tight getting the little ones in. Rear facing, I don't have any idea how you would do it unless you're putting the whole thing in, and even there's not a lot of space to do it. If they're forward facing, they can crawl in. That one might make a little more sense, but you probably want to put it back here on the passenger side. This seat is not one you're going to want to move a whole lot. Time to hop inside the Prelude, and for folks who may have recently been in a Honda Civic, this could look familiar, but just know there are going to be a few differences. And the first one I want to highlight is actually going to be here in the seat. Not just the shape, but also the color. This is going to be not just a separate seat from what we get in the Civic, but also separate from what we get in the driver's side here, where I'm currently sitting. The seats themselves are less bolstered on the passenger side and more so for the driver. I love that little touch. My passenger all day said they were pretty comfortable. We have Prelude there embossed in the headrest. And then of course we get another nice touch where this does exist somewhere between your everyday budget and a little bit more premium experience. We also have Prelude imprinted here on the dashboard. The dash looks a lot like what you find in a Civic, but these nice touches do go, I think, a pretty fair way to set this apart. We'll get to some of the other goodies in a second. Let me talk about storage because there is a decent amount, just not an enormous amount. Remember, this is a still pretty small car. We do have enough room for a regular sized water bottle, a little bit of cubby space back there. Here in the glove box, it is a bin style compartment, relatively large, even though it sits a little bit low. I think folks will actually appreciate how low it sits because it doesn't end up making a very large dashboard that you have to look over. When it comes to screen real estate though, that one isn't going to be large by pretty much anybody's definition. This is going to be one of the smaller screens you're going to get, not just in this segment, but this kind of vehicle. Although I have to admit, not trying to be an apologist, but for vehicles that want to be a driver-centric vehicle, having a smaller screen has never been something that bothered me. It just lets you focus on the road. As you can see, we're running Android Auto, and you can do so with Apple CarPlay as well. That'll happen wirelessly. The equipment that comes here in the Prelude is basically what you find in the Sport Touring on the Civic model, which means fully loaded, all things considered, which does mean we have things like heated seats for the front two passengers. Not only do we not have heated seats for the rear, but we actually don't have climate control for the rear. And by control, I mean there's not even ventilation. So all of your controls are up here. They are going to be dual zone, so driver and passenger, just nothing there in the rear. Going down a little bit here, we have additional charging, 2 USB-C ports, one for charging, one for connectivity, and then of course we have our 12-volt outlet. I've been utilizing the Qi wireless charging mat, nice and easy to get to. I wish it was slid left or right just a little bit. That way there was more space used up and less that I didn't really know what to do with. When it comes to making space a little bit tighter, there are a lot of buttons wrapped up here in what I'm going to call the command center. And there is some shiny black plastic, but actually the proportions of it aren't too bad. So it's likely that this will hold up a little bit better than some other vehicles that do pretty extensive use of that plastic. Parking brake and brake hold on the left-hand side there. Park, reverse, neutral, and drive are going to be your button peck here. Drive is down, reverse is back, park, nice and easy to get to. On the right-hand side is the most interesting part. That's going to be your Sport Shift Plus mode and your drive modes. I found myself cycling through drive modes more than I thought I would. And the Sport Shift Plus, well, wait till we get on the road before you make some decisions on that. You've got a pretty regular size bottle here, or a little bit taller perhaps. That fit without issue in a standard size coffee cup. Little bit of storage to be found here under the armrest, just not terribly large. Just remember, this isn't a very large vehicle, so space can be at a premium. Let's talk about the other screen in the space. There is no heads-up display, so now it comes down to the driver display. This is a pretty simple layout. On the left and the right, you have traditional gauges, but within those, you have configurable options for what you're looking at. On the left-hand side, that's a look at what we're currently listening to through Android Auto. And on the right-hand side, that was our most recent trip. I'll make sure we talk about fuel economy when we get to the drive section. Pulling back, this steering wheel is fantastic. And I say that because, well, it is, but actually it's doing just enough without too much. Taking a quick look over my head, one thing that's missing is going to be any sort of glass roof, whether that be fixed in place or something you can open. Unfortunately, what has been present on the Prelude previously is now gone by the wayside. But when it comes to additional features, we do have a lit vanity mirror. One would expect that to be the case. We also have a sliding sun visor, so you will get sun protection even if you're not worried about anything coming through the ceiling. We have a sunglasses holder here, which I do appreciate even in a smaller vehicle. And I know it's going to be tough to see up here, but just a couple controls, things like your lights for the interior as well as your SOS button. Time to get out on the road, and we're going to start with Gusto. This is the Prelude in sport mode with Sport Plus Shift on. Off we go. The first thing you'll notice is engine noise, but the engine isn't pushing in the same way. The power delivery isn't as linear as regular acceleration. It's not bad. Let me be totally clear. It's not a bad system. It is more of a novelty and not one that I would absolutely use. It's all, like, at least not regularly. I might use it if I go, hey, I'm a spirited drive, I want to hear an engine, I want to enjoy this experience, and even though it is slower, and I promise you it is slower 0 to 60, it does add to the engagement. That 0 to 60 time, we have been at elevation while we're out here. We did our best to get some numbers, but these are going to be preliminary. So wait until we can get them back home, because I think our numbers may end up being a little bit different. With the Sport Plus, in Sport Plus mode, the whole shebang, 0 to 60 in about 8.6 seconds, which is not terribly quick. But when you turn the Sport Plus shift off, and it doesn't do the lag for shifting and simulated gears, that one we got at 7.3 seconds, and that one was fairly consistent. Not blistering by any means, but I think plenty fast. And they did have a few of the Preludes, the older generation Preludes, for us to drive, and it feels somewhat like the performance, not one for one, but somewhat like the performance of the last generation, the 5th generation Prelude that went away in 2001. You want to work the engine, you want to work the car to get the most out of it. But where this really starts to step away from the previous generations is in some of the other specifics. Let's talk about braking. 60 to 0 happened in 115 feet. And again, I want to get back home to test that because we didn't have a great spot to try and do it. No matter what, that is pretty quick. Not lightning, not high performance, not Porsche 911 numbers, but very respectable. And the way it stopped was also very nice. Hopefully you don't do a lot of emergency stops in your life, but this handled everything very confidently, very composed, and not one that felt like an emergency, just some pretty serious braking. Now let's talk about the handling, because that is where this is going to be either way worth it or totally not worth it. Because under the hood is a Civic Hybrid, but what's underneath that, I guess, in the suspension, is going to be the Civic Type R. And how do those two things meet? I think beautifully. Match made in heaven? Maybe not. I don't want to wax poetic on something that does need some refinement changes or maybe a little bit more power, but we'll get to that at the end. What this does is allow you to switch between modes in a way that Civics haven't really done before and take your everyday commuter and make it a great car for the back roads. Yes, great. Front wheel drive, only 200 horsepower. I have had a blast throwing this car around the canyons. Am I too easily impressed? I don't think so. Did we run out of lateral grip? Occasionally. But for any person who has one car and they want to make the most of it, you have to think about what you're using it for more often than not. For me, it's commuting. And I love the idea of having a commuter that can be fun. It's one of the reasons I don't have a Prius, because a Prius is just not fun enough. And there have been a few who have tried to make it so, and it still falls well short. This does what that Prius just simply cannot. Think of this as a Prius GR, but obviously a Honda version of it. And I think that is a really good comparison. And Toyota, maybe the gauntlet is thrown your way to go ahead and create something similar. That's how it handles. These roads are fantastic to drive, and this car is happy to do it. It's the happy little Honda. Give it momentum, and it'll give you all it's got. But when you come out of the canyon and you go back to your daily commute, what's that like? Well, let's switch out of sport mode and turn off the sport shift because, again, I don't think you're going to spend a whole lot of time there. Drop it down into comfort, and this becomes a smooth cruiser. It's refinement and sophistication that you're just not going to find in any other Civic, and not even the Type R with which this shares its suspension with, because it has been not detuned, but certainly retuned. The Type R is not the harshest thing in the world, although it kind of can be. You can turn that down and make it more comfortable. But this turns into not more comfortable, but just genuinely comfortable. If I give the handling a score, maybe an A-, where there is obviously room for improvement in maybe some handling characteristics with the front wheel drive, with the limited tire size, although bigger than you get on a regular Civic. In this case, this is a genuinely comfortable experience. And it's one that I'm willing to pay for. I don't know if everyone will be, and there are going to be somebody who's going to swap out for a track-ready suspension, full track-ready suspension on their Prelude. That wouldn't be me. I don't think I'm getting that old, but I know that I like more comfort than maybe I used to. And the value proposition is in that. It's in the versatility and the ability to meet the needs in a good way, not just barely. The sport suspension is plenty tight and responsive and engaging, and that's what this really should be, especially considering it's not a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 sports car. But what I'm most impressed with is how it can go from sport to comfort and really make that work. And the GT in the middle, I'd be fine doing GT for my everyday driving. That might be where I default setting things, but either way, you have options. There are places where these scores are going to fall away though. 0 to 60 time, obviously not terribly impressive, but the cabin noise here is also not out of this world. There's a lot of Civic still in here, not just in the design, but in the overall quality, which is not a bad thing. You just know you're not paying for extra niceties because those niceties are not present here. And one more spot, I hate to do it for you, that you'll have to wait until we get this at home, is going to be for the final mile per gallon. While we were driving this, on the way up the hill, I got, in spirited driving, about 30 miles per gallon. And I think that's fantastic. But we will have to get this back home so we can get some more controls in here. Either way, spirited driving, when you put this thing in sport mode and just hammer on it, I still got about 30 miles per gallon going up the hill. So as we come to the end of it, have you figured out what the Prelude is or isn't? And if not, let me give you one more piece of information that may end up being helpful. That is the starting price. This isn't exactly cheap. $43,195 is what it takes to get into a Prelude. And that is, no two ways about it, about $9,000 more than the somewhat comparable Civic Hybrid. Hatch or sedan, take your pick. $9,000 is a lot of money. Do I think there's $9,000 worth of extra experience in this car? I think I do. But the key here is that you have to be, well, someone who has to do a daily commute and understands that commute and wants to do it reasonably, but really loves the idea of being able to flip a switch and say, and this is my car for the weekend. And you don't have a Porsche budget because, of course, Porsche makes a car for that, but none of them are anywhere near as efficient. And yes, this is less efficient than a Civic Hybrid or an Accord Hybrid or the CR-V Hybrid, but it exists in this little niche, and I think it should be here. Honda knows they are not going to sell anywhere as many of these Civic Hybrids or Accord Hybrids, but that doesn't mean there isn't a place for it. And I would love to see this body in more racing series. And I think Honda's already working on that. If I missed a beat there, let me know down in the comments. But this is a car that I think should exist. Electrification is the future. Doesn't mean fully electric, but hybrid is for power and performance and efficiency and all of these things. That's the moment we're in right now, and I think the Prelude is here to rise to that. And the Prelude has always been a technologically advanced version of the Honda platforms. It had things like four-wheel steering. It had the super handling front-wheel drive system. It eliminated all of your understeering, or at least most of it. And none of those were particularly quick. 200 horsepower is where they topped out at, but where the last one had just over 150 pound-feet of torque, this one is at 230. And yes, it is on the heavier side. It's no lighter than you find over in a Civic, not really. And that is a bit of a bummer. But if you want to take the rear seats out, I bet you could save a few pounds there. I'm sure, and I've already seen that Mugen has a couple kits coming out that may or may not include some carbon fiber bits. I don't know whether that's really worth the money, but Honda folks have always been excited about their vehicles and spent money that maybe doesn't make the most sense to me. That's okay. The one thing I would do, go ahead and get the accessory spoiler for this model or check out other spoilers because that completes the shape in an absolutely fantastic way. I like this Prelude. I think there's a place for it. Whether or not it's in your garage is going to be up to you, but I am very curious if you looked at one and said, this just doesn't quite cut it. What did it fall short on? Was it the power? Was it the efficiency? Was it cargo volume, people volume? What is it that Honda could look at and say, we understand it doesn't make that and we're going to keep it this way, or they say, you know what, we hadn't thought about it. Let's go ahead and make a change. And if there's one change I could make to this, Honda, if you're listening, I would get another port on the other side, and that is for a plug-in hybrid, because if this had 20 or 30 miles of electric driving range, honestly, half of what the old Honda Clarity did, that would make it much more appealing to myself, and it also means you could probably get more power out of it. A little heavier, balance out the weight distribution, but make it a little bit more performance-oriented. Is that gonna be something you call a Prelude SI? That one, I don't know. I know it's gonna be quite a bit to chew, but those are my thoughts. If you have any, leave them down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. Till next time, we'll see you down the road.